lunchroom with a stage in it. And so we had the band did their practicing down there, but you could hear them all over the school. So I talked the board into building us a band house out in next to the ball field, football field, and that took care of that problem. And so then I got the school was just not organized at all, and so I put in to get first my assistant principal a raise in salary, and he went down and he went down to get a raise and told me he was going to ask for $300, and I told him to ask for $1,000, and he came back smiling. That was Dr. Blanton, was my assistant principal, and so then I organized each department, so they had a department head, and I had to get them a supplement, and I got them $300 a year, so we organized that so they could meet together and sort of coordinate a curriculum. And then they had a library, the lab had no equipment in it, so I finagled around and they had a federal program that they were subsidized $500. I could get $500 from the federal government on the government program, and for matching funds. So I had $500 in my in some of the accounts there in the school. And so I devised the thing that I took then the $1,000, and I went to the superintendent and told him if he could get me $1,000, I'd buy $2,000 worth of lab equipment. So he said, well, go for the board, see if you can do it. And I told him, I said, well, y'all want to double your money. I said, give me $1,000 and I'll buy $2,000 worth of lab equipment. So they jumped at it. So I outfitted the whole lab with that $2,000. So I had to finagle a lot of ways to get things going. And
and I think I jumped a little ahead when I said, because in the meantime the librarian died, and at that time Kathy was a baby, 18 months old, and I asked that you let me take that position, and so I did. And so we worked together at Berrien High School, and I enjoyed that. And I'm sorry that I jumped ahead of saying what happened, but thinking back that far, I don't get everything just exactly.
The B-24 crew during the war. After the war, we didn't get together. We lost track of each other. And we didn't get together until 1995. That was 50 years after we had seen each other last. And so Andy Snyder, our nose gunner, lives in Midland, Texas, and Al Siebert, who is a navigator and lives in Massachusetts, in Boston. They got together and started contacting all of us, and finally they got us together, and we found out that there were 5 of us still alive. 4 had died. 1 had committed suicide, our our engineer. He was from Missouri, and he was a farmer. And the stress, I suppose, was more than we realized. But anyway, he had come home, and they found out that shortly after that he committed suicide, which was very sad for us. And we found out that our tail gunner, Johnny Bradley, who was our youngest and happiest guy, he had made a Baptist minister and had preached for 35 years. He had died of cancer, and his widow was still came with us later on, and we got to know her. And Graffier, who was our ball turret gunner, he became an alcoholic and eventually died. And then our Colson, our radio operator, died of cancer, and just a year later his wife died of cancer also, so both of them died. So we learned of all of these things, and we had 5 of us left. It was me and Al, the navigator in Boston, and Andy, and then Jim Pruitt in Washington State and out at Bremerton, and then C.J. Cross was in Nashville, Tennessee, and so I'm in Knoxville. He was in Knoxville, and amazingly, all 5 of our wives were still living, and they were the same wives we all married. We've all been married now over 60 years. They're still living today, and this is January 2009, and all 5 of us are still alive, and our wives are still alive, and most are doing quite well. Jim is having some difficulty, but he's still operating all right. But in 1995, we got together, we got everybody together, and they came to Atlanta. And we met in Atlanta the first time. And I never will forget when we went to the airport to pick them up. Time I saw each one of them, I could tell it, and it was just like I saw them yesterday. It was amazing. And we had a great time, and they came, and we were living in the Brownwood condominiums. And of course we took them around, and CJ brought his car down, and we toured around Atlanta and saw the sights. But one highlight was we had a picnic out in our park there in Brownwood condominiums, and Kathy's children came out and serenaded us. Jessica and Mark played and sang. Jessica sang and Mark sang, and Jessica and Mark played, and Justin and John were there. John was just I believe it was, I don't know where John was he there or not. At any rate, and we taped that, and we still have that. And we went to church, and just had a marvelous time getting caught up on all of the past 50 years. And then we decided that every year we would get together and take a trip together. And so you want
And Marie, who is the wife of Al, she she took an attachment to me, and but she called me Little Bit. But I enjoyed learning about them and meeting them, and of course I tried to connect their work with him when they were overseas and flying over enemy territory, and I was able to. So you want to be?
Well, anyway, we each year we would pick out a place to go, and we went to places like Branson. One year we went to Branson and see all the shows, and one year we went to the Yellowstone National Park. That was a great experience. And
I really, really enjoyed going to that, to the Yellowstone. And Marie, she took the initiative to get someone to, in the park, to drive us
it was our
around.
guide. We had a guide,
It was a guide.
and we took a bus.
And so one thing that the guide was trying to get us to do is to look up. We were right next to a mountain, and look up and find a sighting. They call it a sighting, and it was a white goat,
Mountain goat, white mountain goat.
white mountain goat that we were trying to locate. And finally, we saw it, and it was that was really a great experience, and we just had so much fun at Yellowstone.
Yeah.
And we saw all of the, went to all of the places, seeing that bubbling water coming from way underneath the
Mud pots.
earth.
Mud pots they call
Of
them.
mud pots.
And Geyser, we went to see Old Faithful and anyway. Well, anyway, we went to had a cruise to Alaska. We flew out to Washington D.C., Washington State, and met with Jim Pruitt. He set up the trip and we went up on a cruise there. And another place we went to was Boston. Al and Marie was our host there, and we had to travel around in that area and let's see, where else did we go? We went to Oklahoma. Colorado, and we went up Pikes Peak. We had already been to Pikes Peak, and I drove up the first time when we were there, and like scared Francis to death. But anyway, this time we took the train up. It was a
Trolley.
trolley. It pulled itself up and had two tracks, and then in the center it had a chain, a big chain under the bottom, and it had tracks, and it would pull itself up to the top of the mountain. And of course that was quite a slow operation, but that was a experience, and we went all over Colorado. I can't tell you all the places we went, but we went to Vail and Aspen and over this different places.
Well, that was at a different time.
Yeah.
This is,
Yeah.
it was not the crew. Also, which I enjoyed a whole lot, was going to this place, was it in Tennessee, that we got this big house that we all stayed in the same place?
Oh yeah, that was Gatlinburg.
Gatlinburg.
We went to Gatlinburg, rented a big log house out on the edge of Gatlinburg, and that's when Johnny Bradford's Johnny, our tail gunner, his widow came over, and her son came and stayed with us that time. It was a big log cabin we rented, and we had quite a good time there. But so we got together, and then the last time we got together, they came down here. We got to where Jim couldn't travel, so and CJ, he had problems traveling, so Al and Andy came down here 2 years ago, and that was the last time we got together and stayed with us, and stayed with us for 3 days, and that was our last trip together. So, but we still stay in touch, and I hear from them, every couple of months, and we call each other and see how everybody's getting along.
But Al and Marie seems to be getting along real well, and Andy's not doing too well at this point.
But anyway, I get Christmas cards from all of them, and we get birthday cards, and we have anniversary cards. We send them, and we stay in touch, real close touch, all the time. And but
My experience with them has been very good. I've enjoyed meeting and learning about them, and they tell us about the things that's happening in their family. So I think that's about as much as we. Was there any other place? I really enjoyed going to Munson too. Listening to the music over there. You know,
Branson.
Branson.
Branson, not Munson. Branson. Listening to the music over there, and you know how I'm a music bug. And that was a nice trip.
And we took photographs of each place, and so we have those on record. And but anyway, they're a great group.
We got a couple of questions now that we've wrapped it up, the history part. You've seen a lot of changes, both of you, over the years, from the advent of the automobile to landing on the moon to all the way up to the internet. And,
Well, it's amazing. I was born and raised as a child in the horse and buggy age. Cars were they were a novelty. And in the 1920s, Daddy bought a Star, and later he bought a Model T, which my sister promptly wrecked and had a cut on her head, and we always held that as a laughing matter. But at any rate, we on Saturdays we would go to town to Ray City. We were farmers, and we'd hook up the wagon or the buggy and go in. All the farmers came to town on Saturday to socialize and to buy their groceries for the next week. The staples. Of course, we grew most of our food, and the lot would just be filled with horses and mules and wagons and saddle horses, and like you see in a western, they had hitching posts all over the parking lot. That was a horse parking lot. Anyway, that's where we started, and then, of course, we had no paved road in our county. And I remember the first paved road was Highway 129 that came through Ray City. It was paved, and it was paved by convicts, and they used shovels, wheelbarrows, and horse-drawn scoops, a big scoop, and they just pulled along and scooped up the dirt. And then they would throw that up. When they got it up to where they wanted on the road, they'd just throw it up and empty it out and go get another scoop. But anyway, it was mostly hand work that they built those highways. So that was the first highway that, what we call them hard tops, that we had. Florida was a little ahead of us, but what Florida did was they went in, before that we had 3-rut roads. And they were just dirt roads winding through the woods. And 2 ruts were for the wheels, and the one in the middle was for the horse. So they went in there and just graded off those 3-rut roads and just kept them winding all through the woods and paved them. And they were only 1 car wide. They were about 8 feet wide. So we went to Florida one time and bought a 32 Chevrolet, and it had the first trunk on it that was on that I ever heard of on a car, and it was actually a trunk. It had a rack on the back and then a trunk sitting on the back of it, and you open the lid from the top. So it was really a trunk. So that's where the word trunk comes from. And at any rate, we wound through this little winding going down to my grandmother's down in Arcadia, Florida. No, not Arcadia, in Lakeland, Florida. And when we come to a horse, a wagon, buggy, sometime we meet a car, we had to pull off to the side. One of us had to pull off and let the other one by. And that's the way you did. And so cars, then Model A come on, and it had it was really a snazzy car, the Model A was. And it had a rumble seat. And that was the romantic thing about it. You'd get your girlfriend and you'd ride in the rumble seat. And you could hold hands and kiss.
And they say, let's go rumbling.
But that was a rumble seat.
Let me tell just a
Okay.
few things. In the beginning, going to church, we went to church in a wagon. And that was my first experience in going to church. And then when I grew up and I was working, I was working at the dime store, and I would work on Saturday. I guess I was mighty young to be working at the dime store, but I think I was no more than 15 years old. And my dad would take, we lived on a farm, and he would, at that time, we had moved from transportation in a wagon to, he had a little Model T car, and he would take me in Opelika, and I'd work at the dime store. And so I moved from the wagon to that little Model T from the time I was a little baby going to the church, and I was a teenager to a Model T. So that change, I remember. I don't remember the change from.
Well, after that.
But then we'd go visit the people that lived close to us, and at that time we still had a touring car then, and Vivian could drive, and we would instead of having bridges to overpass a stream or a river or something of that sort. This was a big stream. We had to cross the stream in drive through this stream. Didn't have any bridge or anything to travel over it. So there's quite a change from that to now.
Well, that too, you were talking about cars. Then we advanced on into the Hudson had a great big car, and the bigger they had seemed like better, but it was had such a big body on it, and then they had they moved into sports cars. They had, I can't think of the name of it now, but it had a beautiful front radiator, and it was a two-seater without.
Studebaker?
No, it wasn't. Oh Lord, no, Studebaker was a disaster. At any rate, but the cars then, of course, developed on in, and I think you pretty well know how cars progressed. Airplanes began to come into in the 40s, the 30s. Of course, they had them, but not commercial. They were just for they'd have air shows. And Amelia Earhart came to Macon one time, and she came in a biplane, and they walked the wings. They'd get out on. Of course, the biplane has struts on it, you know, and they'd hold to those struts, and they gave out chewing gum, peppermint chewing gum. She was advertising chewing gum, and they would give you a ride for a couple of dollars or something like that. And then in the 40s, they started with the passenger planes like the Douglas C-18. It was a tail dragger. That is, it didn't have a nose wheel. It just, the back end just drove with on a little didn't even have a wheel. It was just a rod under there for the tail dragger, we call it. At any rate, when we got back from overseas, me and my friend, we were down and mustered out in Tampa at Drew Field. All of the commercial companies sent representatives down there trying to recruit pilots for their commercial aircraft. So we went to Jacksonville. Me and my friend went to Jacksonville. He lived in Jacksonville. We went to Jacksonville to try out for Delta. And at that time, they just had these little DC-18s, and they carried just 18 passengers. And so he two-engine, twin engine. So the guy took us up and let me fly, and I started doing like you do, we'd play around, and he said, "Oh, no, you can't do that." Says, "You gotta do it easy, you scare the passengers, and you gotta do this easy, and you can only do a 15-degree bank and all that sort of thing." They got down, and we asked him how much we get paid. He said, "Well, we can start you off at $450 a month, and we'll raise you $50 a month for the first 6 months. And that'll put you to $600, and then you become a first pilot, but you'll have to fly co-pilot for that time." Well, this insulted us. We were a first pilot. We were command pilots of a 4-engine aircraft, and this kind of insulted us. And so we told him no, sir, we really wasn't interested. Well, within less than a year's time, they came out with the Constellation, which was a 4-engine aircraft. It was most beautiful. It looked like a fish. It was so beautifully designed, and it was the prettiest plane I'd ever seen. And we would have stepped right into that, and we were making 3 or 4 times the amount of money we were making. So we just kind of missed out. That was one of the times we missed out on something. But at any rate,
So that was a mistake.
that was a mistake. Well, I thought it was a mistake at the time, but I had to change my whole career and everything. You'll be flying 180 hours a month, so you could have another business on the side. That's the way pilots did back then. But at any rate,